accompanied the general into retirement after he laid down his arms. 3 years later, the crown princess appeared at our cottage, weeping. That woman killed my son, yet he wants to make her his secondary consort. Reese, my dear brother, what should I do? Her eyes glistened with tears, the picture of helplessness. My husband set down his hoe, careful not to soil her with the mud on his hands. You always knew, he said with a sigh, that I can't bear to see you cry. He retrieved his dusty armor and left with her for the capital. He left me with only 2 words. Wait for me. I sold our chickens and ducks and gave the furs from his hunts to our neighbors. If he returns, I said, tell him that Grace is dead. This deer hide is so fine. It would make a perfect jacket. Are you sure you don't want it? Auntie Martha asked, her voice full of pity for my loss. I smiled. The books say it is warm and humid in the south. I won't need it. She took it and filled a basket to the brim with freshly cooked vegetable buns for me. They're not worth much, but keep them for the road, she urged. I didn't refuse. As she saw me off, she hesitated. I remember your husband headed north when he left. Why are you going south? Are you sure you are not mistaken? I am not mistaken, I said. Her eyes widened. You two have always been so devoted. He'll be worried sick when he returns and finds you gone. Would Rice be worried? The old me would have thought so now. I wasn't so sure. In the past half-month, he had been angry with me more times than in the past 3 years combined. One moment he was accusing me of being inhospitable to our guest. The next he was calling me petty and spiteful. Rice told me to wait for him, but he left in such a hurry he never heard my reply. I thought for a moment and told Auntie Martha, if he returns, just say that Grace is dead. I went back to our thatched cottage by the stream. This was the home Riss and I had built with our own hands. I skillfully lit the kindling in the stove. The dry straw caught quickly, and in moments, the fire consumed the house, turning it to ash. Then, with my medicine box and a small bundle on my back, and a bamboo basket on my arm, I set off, heading south. A little over 2 weeks ago, a noble lady had arrived in our small village. The moment she saw Reese, her eyes reddened. Reese, my dear brother, not a word from you in 3 years. Do you have any idea what I've been through? Reese put his hoe back in its place. Don't cry, he comforted her. The wind is strong. Come inside. Then he turned to me. Grace, would you mind making a bowl of ginger tea? I crouched before the stove, distractedly waving a small fan, my ears tuned to the conversation next door. That woman killed my son, yet he wants to make her his secondary consort. A maidservant chimed in. Her Highness has suffered so much since the general left. Reese's voice was cold. How dare he? I brought the steaming ginger tea into the room. The maidservant brushed a drop of water from the bowl's rim. Who knows if this is even clean? She said with disgust. The crown princess took the bowl and chided her. What can you expect from a country servant? Don't make things difficult for Riss. My face flushed with anger. I looked at Riss. She said calmly. Ella, this is my wife, Grace. Her eyes flew open in shock. The tea in her hands tilted, spilling onto the floor. The general married a woman like this? The maidservant exclaimed. Reese's expression was unreadable. He said to me, Grace, please bring another bowl. The astonishment and contempt in their eyes made my feet feel like lead. No, I mumbled. Reese's voice grew stern. Grace. At the very least, I whispered. They should apologize. The maidservant snickered. The crown princess cut in gently. It is all right. I never could stand the taste of ginger tea anyway. You know that, Riss. Don't make things hard for me. Her intimate tone softened Riss's gaze. He shook his head helplessly. You never take care of yourself. My lips moved, but anything I might have said felt out of place. So I remained silent. That night, Riss complained that I had been rude. She traveled all this way, and she couldn't even have a warm cup of tea, he said. Grace, Ella is my cousin. She has been spoiled since she was a child, and her nature is too simple, which is why she easily offends people. Besides, it was my fault. I didn't introduce you to her properly, which led to the misunderstanding. Reese was usually serious but rarely lost his temper. This time he was so angry he took his blanket and slept on the floor. One on the bed, one on the ground. He had become the wronged party. I began to wonder if I was being too sensitive. In the middle of the night, I pulled him up and admitted I was wrong. He sighed, stood up, and held me, teasing. Grace has such a petty heart. The magnolia that made you twist your ankle had to be dug up. The husband that made you unhappy had to be sent rolling on the cold floor before you'd relent. That wasn't it at all. He had gone out that day but hadn't brought back the magnolia he'd promised, and I had only apologized because I was afraid he would catch a chill on the cold floor. I just wanted to soothe him. Your Highness, I've looked into it. The general never registered a marriage here. The maid's voice was disdainful. She is just a nameless country girl. My hands sorting herbs paused. In the room, Ella's voice was faint. He told me he would never marry another. A rack of herbs crashed to the floor. My heart skipped a beat. I quickly knelt to pick them up. I remembered our wedding day. We hadn't bought a wedding dress or a red veil. It was Auntie Martha who kindly brought over a red candle. That night, a pair of warm hands held mine. Riss's voice was deep as he said, "From now on, we will live a good life together." All these years, he hunted, and I practiced medicine. Our life was simple but peaceful. I thought we were an ordinary couple, but it turned out to be just my wishful thinking. I was heartbroken. My master had only taught me to read and to identify herbs. She hadn't taught me about these things. The long, overcast sky finally broke, and rain poured down. I miserably picked through the medicinal herbs in the mud. Riss returned from his hunt and pulled me into the house. "It is raining so hard. Leave them." I shook off his hand and stubbornly continued picking. "General, come quickly. Her Highness is unwell," the maidservant called from the doorway. Riss let go of my hand and hurried inside. The rain that day was so heavy. I caught a chill, and with a dizzy head, I brewed myself a soup to ward off the cold. Riss was in the other room, taking care of Ella. He rushed out to find me. "She is having a heart episode. Her usual prescription is missing avodia fruit. Do you have any?" I tried to clear my head and remember. I shook my head. "There is none left." He frowned, agitated. Then his eyes fell on the dregs of herbs by the stove. His expression froze. "Then what is this?" he asked coldly. It was the avodia fruit from my cold remedy soup. Of course, Riss recognized it. He didn't have time to wonder why I was drinking medicine. He was just disappointed. "Grace, I never thought you were such a petty person." My voice was stuffy from my blocked nose. "It is not like that." Reese turned and walked away, heading out into the downpour to find medicine for Ella. When I went to check on Ella, I overheard their conversation. "The general still cares for you, Your Highness. He can't bear to see you cry or suffer." The moment you fell ill, he was beside himself with worry. Ella's voice was melancholic. "Reese is a very good man." The maidservant smiled. "Back then, for your sake, he relinquished command of 200,000 troops in the throne room, all to secure your position as crown princess. Everyone saw how deeply he cared for you." Ella sighed without a word. "You will only need to say the word," the maid comforted her, "and he will return to the capital with us to seek justice for you." A gust of night wind cleared my foggy mind. In the distance, Riss, wearing a straw cloak and carrying a faint oil lamp, hurried back. I stood in the doorway and said softly, "Husband, my head hurts, my chest hurts, and I feel very unwell." Raindrops dripped from the eaves, soaking my shoulders. Riss took off his cloak and pulled out a clean, dry packet of medicine from his tunic. He lowered his eyes, his voice chillingly detached. "Have you made enough of a scene?" The bitter taste of medicine lingered on my tongue. My stuffy nose made it hard to breathe. I opened my mouth slightly, only to have it filled with a gust of cold wind, triggering a violent coughing fit. Riss didn't pause as he walked past me. The next day, Ella was much better. I was wrapped in a thick quilt, still in bed long after the sun was high, and hadn't made breakfast. Riss stood a few feet away, his voice cold. If you are going to be as jealous and petty as a village wife, then you needn't bother coming to the capital. My stomach rumbled. I got up and cooked 2 bowls of porridge. Riss's expression softened slightly, but after one mouthful, he retched, nearly vomiting up stomach acid. Why is it bitter? I slowly drank my sweet, warm, sweet potato porridge. I added coptis powder. Of course it is bitter, I thought. His face turned ashen. You will stay home and reflect on your behavior, lest you go out and make a fool of yourself. I lowered my eyes. As I waited for my half-eaten bowl of porridge to cool, I finally understood. In his heart, Grace was just a petty, spiteful, unpresentable country girl. I had wanted to tell him that the bitterness in my heart was just like the coptis he had tasted. When Riss left, he didn't even want to see me. He just said through the door, "Wait for me." I gently tapped the straw mat beneath me. Riss had gathered the dried grass, and I had woven it myself. Everything in this home we had built together. The square table and low stools in the house. The vine baskets and wooden herb racks in the yard. The swing and the small shed by the medicine field. All these things that once brought me joy suddenly felt tasteless. Perhaps it was time for me to leave too. The town ferry was bustling with people. A peddler I knew called out, "Mistress Grace, are you heading north to find your husband?" Many people had seen Riss leave on a luxurious passenger boat that day. I shook my head. Which boat goes south? Before my master died, she had mentioned her hometown was a water town in the south. I was an orphan with no home, so I decided to make her home my own. The peddler chuckled. Having a tiff with your husband, Brother Riss treats you so well. He always buys malt candy from me for you. I pressed my lips together and didn't answer. His eyes darted around. As he sorted his goods, he waved me onto a departing boat. Quick, quick. This one is heading south. I am going too. I scrambled aboard. My savings just covered the fare, and the buns from Auntie Martha were my provisions. When I reached the bottom of the basket, I found 5 hidden eggs. After the eggs were gone, the peddler got off the boat with me. Brother Riss works hard to provide a good life for you both, he said earnestly. When you argue from opposite ends of the country, your hearts only grow further apart. Men have it tougher. You should be more understanding. Mistress Grace. With that, he slipped into the crowd like a fish. I looked up and saw a tall city gate. That meddling peddler had brought me to the capital. I counted the coins in my pocket over and over. I finally found a job in an apothecary. After 7 days of grinding herbs, the owner threw me out, along with my bundle. Your skills are terrible, you've ruined good ingredients, he sneered. What, you want to be paid? I am being merciful by not making you pay for the herbs. I was humiliated at the door, and yet the most rigorous physician there had praised my preparation of the medicines. Just then, 2 women were driven out by the physician. Look at yourselves. You want medical treatment. You are not afraid of dirtying someone's hands. One of the women who had looked pitiful a moment before, instantly transformed, her expression turning sultry. Oh, that is not what you said last night. You praised my slender waist and soft hands. You even said you needed to hold my feet to fall asleep. The old physician, well past 50, sputtered with rage. You are spouting nonsense, slander. Women of your kind have no shame, no decency. She snorted and met the lewd gazes of the passers-by without flinching. After the crowd dispersed, her domineering air vanished. She gently supported the pale-faced woman beside her. It is okay. The capital is a big city. I refuse to believe we can't find someone willing to treat you. I approached with my small medicine box. Perhaps I could try? No one would treat prostitutes. They were considered unclean. So I became the physician of the House of Gentle Springs. The sisters here were beautiful and spoke sweetly. They didn't mind that I consulted my medical books while treating them. Instead, they massaged my shoulders, fed me fruit, and asked if I was tired. When I left my village, the grapevines were just starting to climb their trellises. Now, heavy snow weighed down the branches in the capital. Simonine was gossiping. General Riss has returned victorious. I wonder what reward he'll ask for on behalf of the crown princess this time. A customer from the Ministry of Rights said, The general didn't even go to court to receive his honors. He was in a rush to go back to his hometown to find his wife. At the same time, a young master from a wealthy family with a jade pin in his hair, but clutching 3 old copper coins, arrived at the house of Gentle Springs. He smiled the moment he saw me. "My lady, I've finally found you." I felt a headache coming on. Ruby had told me that young Master Jasper of the Shoe family was a notorious soothsayer. He wouldn't even step out of his house without casting coins to decide which foot to lead with. That day I had been gathering herbs on South Mountain, outside the city, and had caught a hibernating snake for medicinal use. I had startled Jasper, who was hiking. He had dropped to the ground, picking up the coins I had accidentally kicked, muttering, "The wind trigram. A withered tree meets spring. This is most auspicious." Then he looked up, his eyes fixed on me. "My lady," he had exclaimed. City people were so strange. I had grabbed my snake and run down the mountain. I never expected this mad soothsayer to find me here. He looked at me with earnest, shining eyes. Before I left home that day, I fasted and bathed for 3 days, knelt before the ancestral tablets for 2 hours, and then washed my hands to cast the hexagrams with a pure heart. The reading told me to ask the spring wind. "You were the first woman I saw. You are my fated wife." Looking at the young soothsayer, I asked humbly, "Does your line of work pay well?" "No results, no fee. I don't cheat young or old," he replied. "So, how much money have you made?" Jasper looked at the sky, then at the ground. Finally, he declared righteously, "To speak of money is vulgar." I regretfully withdrew my gaze. "You've made a mistake," I told him seriously. I pointed to the fine snow under the eaves. "It is clearly the dead of winter. How could you ask the spring wind?" This silly young master couldn't even tell a convincing lie. No wonder he couldn't make a living. Jasper shook his head. Adamant. "Impossible. You are fated to have only one marriage, and it is with me." He came to the house of Gentle Springs every day, from when the snow covered the mountains until the carp leaped through the breaking ice and spring peeked through the cracks. "By the willow-lined dike on the city's outskirts," I told him. "Spring is here. When the wind picks up, cast your coins again, and then stop coming to see me." Jasper tossed the coins in his hand without answering. A familiar voice called out, "Grace!" It was Riss. He rushed over and grabbed my wrist, his grip so tight I thought he would crush it. His eyes were filled with grief and anger. "Grace, you deceived me so cruelly." Riss said I was heartless. After returning to the capital with the crown princess, he had immediately been sent on a military campaign. He was used to life in the army, but this time, he couldn't eat or sleep. He was always thinking of me. The moment the war ended, he didn't even return to the capital but went straight back to our village. But all he heard was news of my death. The shock and grief made him fall ill. It was Auntie Martha, taking pity on him, who told him the truth. He had traveled south looking for me for months, with no trace. He never expected to find me back in the capital. He was thinner, his brow furrowed with sorrow. He was both shocked and overjoyed to see me, but his first words were a complaint. "You are far too temperamental. I was a little cold to you when I left, and you retaliate like this. You are a general's wife. What wife in the capital demands her husband to grovel and beg for forgiveness? Only I could tolerate a temper like yours." Jasper brushed his hand away. "You are hurting her," he frowned. Reese's eyes narrowed. "Who is he?" he demanded. I rubbed my sore wrist and thought for a moment. First, I said to Jasper, "See, I told you your reading was wrong. I've been married before. I can't be your wife." Then, I turned to Riss. "You are right. I am temperamental, and a husband like you, I no longer want." Reese's eyelids fluttered. He looked up and scoffed. "I've spoiled you too much." His voice held a coldness I had never heard before. Reese investigated my every move in the capital. That night, he came to the house of Gentle Springs. He requested Ruby and made her sing all night without a sip of water. The next day, he requested Cleo and made her play the zither all night without a rest. I brewed a throat-soothing soup for Ruby and applied medicine to Cleo's swollen hands. "I don't know what has gotten into that nobleman," Ruby rasped. I felt terribly guilty. Ruby, grateful that I had treated Cleo, had stood outside the apothecary for a whole day to get my 7 days' wages back for me. They were my closest friends in this place. Rhys was doing this to target me. When I went to find Rhys, he was sitting calmly in a private room. "What do you want?" I asked. He sipped his tea leisurely. "Grace, you are my wife. To spend your days in a filthy place like this, consorting with prostitutes. What does that look like? You come from the countryside. It is past time I taught you the customs of the capital." I suppressed the anger in my chest. "Who is your wife?" I asked calmly. "Rhys, did you ever write me a marriage certificate?" A flicker of panic crossed his face. "That was an oversight on my part," he said slowly. Then, with renewed confidence, he added, "Besides me, who else would you marry?" That suffocating feeling, like being drenched in cold rain, washed over me again. The sense of grievance that had kept me awake for countless nights could no longer be contained. "An oversight?" I shouted. "Or was I simply not worth the effort? In your heart, I am an unruly country girl, and you are the great general. You were willing to marry me, so I should be grateful. I don't deserve the formal betrothal gifts. I don't deserve a wedding dress and red silk. And I certainly don't deserve a marriage certificate, but Rhys? Why? Even the poorest family in the village would scrimp and save to buy a piece of red cloth for good luck when they married. But at our wedding, there was only the red candle Auntie Martha had brought. From now on, Grace has a home," she had said with a sigh. "No one will dare bully you anymore." Tears welled in my eyes. My voice dropped. "You are only bullying me like this because you know I am a helpless orphan." Rhys stood frozen, at a loss. "It is not like that," he explained. "You have always been so pure, so different from everyone else. I thought you wouldn't care for such worldly rituals. Besides, if you were unhappy, you should have told me sooner. No one had ever taught me, and my master had died so young." Rhys looked down and took a wooden hairpin from his tunic. "I carved this myself," he said earnestly. "When I went to war before, I never cared if I lived or died. But this time, I cherished my life, because I thought of you at home, waiting for me, Grace. I don't know when it happened, but you've become more important to me than I ever imagined." I fiercely wiped the tears from my eyes. I snapped the hairpin in two and threw it at his feet. Seeing his shocked and hurt face, I delivered my final threat. "Don't you ever come back to the House of Gentle Springs, or I'll set a venomous snake on you." That was how I had driven away the village bully before. But Rhys was worse than any bully. He led his men and raided the brothel. The women lost their livelihood, and panic spread. Ruby and Cleo were filled with despair, overwhelmed with guilt. I gave them all the silver I had. When I explained what had happened, Ruby comforted me instead. "We are like floating duckweed anyway. There are dozens of brothels here. If not this one, we can go anywhere." Her words only made me feel worse. I left the House of Gentle Springs soon after. I had a feeling that if I stayed, I would only bring them more trouble. Once again, I had nowhere to go. Except for Rhys's general's manor. He sent a servant with a message. "My lady, the general is waiting for you at home." I crouched by the riverbank, cursing Rhys and trying to figure out how to make money. Maybe I could go to South Mountain and gather some herbs to trade for a couple of buns. I overheard some people talking. "He is here again. It has been so many days. He stays there from morning till night, doesn't he get cold? Youth these days." I looked over and saw Jasper standing on the embankment, staring blankly at the willow branches. "What are you doing here?" "Without turning," he answered, "waiting for the spring wind." Then he turned in surprise. "Grace." The willow branches had long since budded. The spring wind had blown over countless mountains. A breeze picked up. The coins in Jasper's hand fell, spinning on the ground before stopping. He did this 6 times. He crouched and studied them for a long time. "This time it is finally right," he exclaimed joyfully. Greenery covered the banks, and the cicadas were about to begin their song. Spring was almost over. It seemed he had waited for many winds to get this one reading. He was so happy he fainted. I carried Jasper home. His lips were pale, His cheeks flushed a clear sign of a chill. The Shu family residence had white jade paving stones and a plaque with gold inlay. "I am a physician. I can treat him," I said nervously to his elders. Considering Jasper and I were acquaintances, I added hesitantly, "It is not expensive. 10 copper coins will do." A middle-aged man who looked very much like him had a grim expression. I panicked. I didn't want to admit it, but his illness was partly my fault. And now here I was, asking for a consultation fee. It was only natural they would be angry, but for the sake of my empty stomach, I gritted my teeth. "5 will do." A beautiful woman, her hair adorned with pearls and jade, hurried in. "I heard my daughter-in-law has arrived," she said, looking at me curiously. She took my hand and smiled. "Oh, let me have a look at you." Jasper's father cleared his throat. "Don't frighten her," he ordered. "Simone, take the young mistress to rest." My face was a wooden mask. City people were truly bizarre. Jasper recovered quickly. His mother praised his good taste in finding such a fine wife. His father told him to offer more incense to their ancestors. Apparently, the Shu family really did have an immortal in their lineage, so they were used to Jasper's eccentricities, even though 9 out of 10 of his predictions were wrong. "Well then," I said weakly, "I'll be on my way." 3 pairs of bright eyes stared at me. Just then, a servant announced, "Her Majesty, the Empress has heard that Miss Grace has arrived and wishes to see her." It turned out the current Empress was Jasper's older sister. I was worried. Surely the Empress would be a normal person. On the way to the palace, I saw Rhys. The guards at the gate were chatting. General Rhys finally came to the palace. His Majesty has been wondering what to reward him with. I heard the Crown Princess left the General's manor in tears yesterday. They exchanged knowing glances. Our General, a palace maid, led Jasper and me into the hall. "Don't be afraid," he said cheerfully. "My sister is very nice." But after we paid our respects, the Empress on the throne said with a stone-faced expression, "Nonsense." I felt a wave of relief. "It is one thing for mother and father to be foolish," she scolded. "But you, getting married without even proposing or arranging a banquet. You just let her move in. Aren't you wronging Grace?" Jasper hung his head in shame. "You are right, sister." My heart sank again and again. They really believed in a wife predicted by copper coins. I was in a daze. Amidst the discussion of auspicious dates for the wedding, I managed to speak up. I don't think I've agreed to marry him." The air went still. I could hear the Empress take a deep breath. "You haven't even proposed?" He refused all rewards, and only asked me for a phoenix coronet and robes of rank. He said he wronged her during their wedding and wants to welcome her again with a grand procession, and for me to officiate. The Empress smiled. "Today is truly a day of double happiness." She gestured to me. "This is my younger brother's beloved." Rhys had followed the Emperor in. He was stunned to see me. Grace. His loss of composure silenced everyone in the room. Finally, the Emperor gave a dry laugh. After a moment of deliberation, the Emperor said, So there is no marriage certificate. That makes things simple. Grace, which of these 2 do you choose?" I knelt on the floor and thought for a long, long time. I chose neither. The faces of the Emperor and Empress darkened. The silence in the hall was terrifying. Rhys moved. "Grace comes from the countryside and is unaware of royal authority. I will be sure to discipline her. I beg your Majesty's forgiveness," Jasper said earnestly. "I truly love Grace. I don't want to force her." The audience ended abruptly, with the excuse that the Empress was unwell. I was asked to check her pulse before leaving. As we left, the Empress whispered with Jasper for a long time. He was distracted the whole way out. We left the palace with Rhys. Ella rushed up to him the moment she saw him. "Rhys, what did the Emperor say? Did he issue an edict to punish that slut?" Rhys was silent. A palace maid whispered in her ear, and her face changed. She pointed at me. "You didn't do what you promised me, all for her." Rhys frowned and sighed. "Ella, she wasn't responsible for the death of your child. And as the crown prince, it is normal for him to have multiple wives. You should have understood that when you married him. Besides, I never promised you anything. My devotion to you all these years has been to repay the kindness of your parents. Ella's eyes filled with tears. But you said you would never let me suffer any grievance. I wouldn't have married the crown prince if I hadn't thought you were dead on the battlefield. Watch your words, Grace said sternly, then glanced nervously at me. Grace, don't misunderstand. She is nothing but a lowly country girl. Ella shrieked, breaking down. How could you treat me this way for her? At some point, Jasper, who had been squatting on the ground tossing his coins, stood up and dusted himself off. He shook his head at Ella. You are in for some terrible luck. In the carriage, Jasper and I sat facing each other. The wheels rumbled over the stone street. We were approaching the bustling part of the city. You can let me out here, I said, breaking the silence. His features were handsome, but his expression was dejected. Grace, do you think I am mad? My hand, about to lift the curtain, paused. For the first time, I looked at this soothsayer properly. His fine brows were furrowed in distress. I remembered how he would come to the brothel and never once glance at the beautiful women there. When someone tossed a handkerchief at him, he didn't mock or scorn them. He simply picked it up and returned it. The patrons all knew of the eccentric young master of the Shu family and laughed at him. He never got angry. He would just walk up to them, toss his coins, and if the reading was auspicious, he would offer a few lucky words. Eventually, they would get embarrassed and give him a coin for their good fortune. Ruby and Cleo would tease him, but he would give them a serious reading all the same. I shook my head. You are not mad. His eyes, like dim stars, instantly lit up. I am not too sad that you didn't choose me, he said, then nodded firmly. Really, I won't force you. But could you wait? Wait until I've become better, and then take another look at me. I was stunned. Other than being startled by him calling me his wife for a few days when we first met, he hadn't done anything wrong. Still, I got out of the carriage. Walking on the street, I finally felt a sense of relief. Why did I have to choose at all? My 3 years with Reese had left me wary of marriage. I was afraid that the initial joy would turn into resentment, afraid that the person I shared my bed with would wake up one day a different person, afraid of misjudging someone from the start and having to swallow all the bitterness. Like the patrons at the House of Gentle Springs, many were respected court officials with virtuous wives at home, but in private they unleashed their cruelty on the prostitutes. When I first saw Cleo, she was covered in infected whip marks and festering wax burns. There wasn't a single patch of good skin on her body, and Ruby had been swindled out of her savings by a poor scholar who fancied himself a man of integrity. After he passed the exams and married a beautiful wife, he became her patron again, subjecting her to endless humiliation. And then there was Reese. He had always been a man of responsibility and duty, but his responsibility was entirely directed at Ella. Jasper seemed like a good person, but I was afraid. Before I left the palace, the Empress had given me gold and silver as a consultation fee. Holding the heavy money, I felt a sense of unreality. I took most of it to the House of Gentle Springs and gave it to Ruby and Cleo. If you can find the other sisters from the brothel, please apologize to them for me. Whether they bought their freedom or started their own brothel, it would be better than living at the mercy of others. I remembered how Reese used to say the world was a treacherous place, and that a peaceful life in our village was the greatest happiness. But after leaving the village, I discovered that, while there were black-hearted apothecary owners, there was also the lively laughter of the House of Gentle Springs. They were all good people, just dealt a poor hand in life. I was often ashamed of my pity for them. Ruby had once laughed until she was doubled over, calling me a saint. I could barely feed myself, yet I worried about them selling their smiles while hiding their injuries. Now Ruby, whom I hadn't seen in a long time, took the box of gold and silver without ceremony. Then we're even, she said briskly. You don't need to come back here again. Her tone was harsh, her face a cold mask I had never seen before. Cleo stood by, wanting to say something, but ultimately turned away. I stood there, stunned. I walked away from the house of gentle springs, stepping on the withered leaves in the mud. Perhaps I was just used to being poor. Having too much money made me uneasy. The Empress was truly generous. Even after giving most of it away, I still had 100 taels. I was so afraid of it being stolen that I checked it 3 or 5 times a night and couldn't sleep peacefully. A month later, I used the remaining silver to open a small apothecary in the south of the city. I took in 2 orphan girls to help. Reese came when I was tending to the small medicine garden in the backyard. He stood and watched for a long time. Then he picked up a tool and started working alongside me. It was just like the old days. "Grace, I was wrong," Reese said in a low voice. "I shouldn't have let you suffer like that. I always ignored your feelings. I didn't treat you like a real wife." He sounded sincere, but I was calm. "I only stayed with you because I desperately wanted a home," I said honestly. He shook his head, talking to himself. "When you married me, you said you loved me. How could you marry another?" What I should have said was, at that time, because I wanted a home, I convinced myself I loved him. After I burned that home to the ground, there was nothing left. Seeing my silence, Reese grew anxious. "We were so happy in the village," he reminisced. "When I came home late from hunting, you would warm up my food. When I was injured, you never left my side. When I went to town for salt and oil, you told me to be frugal so we could save for a bigger house." His voice choked. "We were making our lives better and better." I nodded. "I was very good to you." The unspoken words made Riss hang his head in silence. "Every time the peddler came, I bought you malt candy," he mumbled. "The candy made my teeth hurt," I recalled. "And I had to brew myself Coptis tea, but I didn't want to waste it, and you had bought it especially for me, so I always finished it. But Riss, I don't even like sweets." The one who liked malt candy was Ella, who used to follow him around as a child. Riss's face turned pale. He was speechless. "I was wrong too for not telling you directly," I continued. "But you showed me so little kindness. I was afraid that if I spoke up, even that little bit would disappear, like the magnolia that made me twist my ankle. I didn't want you to dig it up for revenge. I wanted it so that every time I saw it in the yard, I would be reminded of your kindness to me, and think that this life was still worth living." Riss's eyes reddened. "Grace, I am sorry," he trembled, but I let out a long breath. It felt like I was saying goodbye to my old, conflicted self. "You should go," I said firmly. I heard that Riss fell ill after he returned home and took several months to recover. The first thing he did when he was well was to transplant many magnolia trees into the backyard of his manor. But it was winter. They couldn't bloom and barely survived. Busyness at the apothecary was slow. People saw a female physician and would just shake their heads and leave. Then one day, for 4 or 5 days in a row, many female customers started coming. I was swamped. Listening to their conversations, I found it strange. I found a spare moment and went to the city god temple they mentioned. A cloth banner hung at a small stall in front of the temple. It read, "Fortunes told, no charge." Jasper sat at the stall, wearing a fur-lined cloak. The fluffy white fur framed his handsome face. A long line of women waited before him. To the unmarried, he would offer a few auspicious words, then say, "Worries weigh on the mind and harm the spirit. You should visit the Pure Heart Hall in the south of the city to see a physician. Your future will surely be smooth." To the married, he would first shake his head and sigh, then say, "You are fated to have 3 sons. But alas, I hear there is a miraculous physician at the Pure Heart Hall. You should go and see." I watched him from a tea house across the street. He sat there all day. As dusk fell and the tea house staff started to close up, Jasper also stood and slowly packed his things. I walked over to him under the lightly falling snow, holding an umbrella. His eyes lit up when he saw me. "Grace, you are not allowed to deceive people," I said with a stern face. "It is not right." He was taken aback. "I am not deceiving anyone. I interpret the hexagrams as they are," he explained, then added in a low voice, "I just added a bit of my own selfish wish." Snowflakes drifted into his eyes. He blinked hard but kept his gaze fixed on me. I felt my face grow warm and looked down. I saw that his hands were red and swollen. The fool didn't even know he had frostbite. I took him back to the Pure Heart Hall and filled a basin with warm water. I placed his hands in it. "You can't be careless with frostbite. It gets worse at night, you won't be able to sleep." "I can't sleep now," he said, looking up at me seriously. "You are always running around in my mind." My heart hammered against my ribs. His clear gaze made me feel shy. I deliberately splashed water from his hands onto his face. "Don't look," I said fiercely, "and don't think." When the northern tribes grew restless, Rees, still recovering from his illness, volunteered to go to the border. He vowed not to return until he was victorious. The night before he left, he stood outside my apothecary all night. I didn't see him. The war was fierce. He won, but at a great cost. His old illnesses returned and he collapsed in the snow on his way back to the capital. His final request to the emperor was to have magnolia trees planted along both banks of the city's moat. No one knew why. The emperor honored his last wish, even ordering magnolias to be planted at every post station on his route back to the capital, to welcome the general's spirit home. I watched as the willow trees nearby were removed. A few laborers were chatting. Without General Rees, the crown prince immediately divorced the crown princess. Such a pity. I say she brought it on herself. What man can tolerate an unfaithful wife? You didn't know the crown princess and General Rees had an affair long ago. The crown prince only endured it for the sake of the country. The blue curtain at the entrance was lifted. A patient had arrived. I focused on my work. 2 years later, business at the apothecary had stabilized. I hired a widowed female physician. I packed my own bags, took some silver, and left. The year I left my village, I felt that the world was vast, yet there was no place for me. I could only make my master's home my own. But my master was an itinerant physician. I should be like her, traveling the land, treating illnesses, and saving people. I just missed her too much. Wanted a home too much. I wanted to escape the gossip orphan, bastard outsider. That is why I had nodded when Riss asked me to marry him, to retire with him to the mountains. But I should have come out to see the world sooner. The world is so large. Where can I not make my home? Even if the road ahead is sand and wind, and the clatter of hooves behind me, I turned. Jasper was sitting on a donkey calling, "Grace." I stood still and watched him get closer. He clumsily dismounted, panting. "Wait for me." I thought for a moment. How did you know which way I was going? After all, I had no direction myself. Jasper tossed his coins and smiled at me. I was silent for a moment. Then asked, "Back on South Mountain, if the woman you met hadn't been me, would you have asked her to be your wife?" "Of course not," he said without hesitation. So were his predictions accurate or not? Did he himself believe in them? I was momentarily confused. I decided not to think about it and just travel with him. The sun was rising. As we walked, I asked, "What did the Empress whisper to you back then? Did she scold you for bringing shame on her with a woman like me?" He walked beside me, leading the donkey. "Oh, my sister. Just things about striking while the iron is hot, taking advantage of the situation, and having 2 children in 3 years. He tilted his head, his laughter bright and clear. "I've done a reading. We're fated to have a daughter." I was speechless. "And what about your parents now that you've left?" "We'll go back in 2 years and let them dote on their granddaughter."